What happens when the world's busiest innovator trades rockets and AI for cobblestones and gelato? When Elon Musk, his partner Shivan, and their kids set foot in Rome, the unexpected was inevitable. From ancient wonders to a private audience with Pope Francis, this journey was anything but ordinary. This was a lot more than just a family vacation. Elon Musk has never been the kind of man who unplugged. For him, relaxation often meant bouncing between designing rockets, brainstorming electric cars, or solving the latest bottleneck at Tesla. But this time, Shivan, his girlfriend, had insisted. It was time for a real family vacation, a chance to slow down and be fully present. And so, somewhat reluctantly, Elon found himself on a private jet with Shivan and their 3 kids, headed for Rome. The Eternal City, as Rome is fondly called, greeted them with an energy that was both ancient and alive. Streets bustled with scooters weaving through the chaos while cafe owners called out to passers-by. Shivan's excitement was palpable. Her enthusiasm set the tone as she handed the kids a colorful guidebook full of historical facts and fun tidbits. Elon, meanwhile, sat quietly, taking it all in with a cautious curiosity. Rome was a world far removed from the sleek lines of Tesla factories or the vacuum of space exploration. It was messy, loud, and unapologetically human. Their first stop was the Colosseum, one of Rome's most iconic landmarks. As they approached, the ancient amphitheater loomed above them, its grandeur still intact despite centuries of wear and tear. Shivan launched into a lively explanation about gladiators and Roman games, animatedly pointing to the different levels of the structure. The kids listened wide-eyed, imagining the roars of a crowd that had once cheered for battles fought long ago. Elon, on the other hand, stood a bit apart, studying the structure intently. "It's incredible how they built this without modern tools," he finally said, as if thinking out loud. Shivan smiled, nudging him playfully. "Even ancient engineers can impress you, huh?" He gave a small nod, still deep in thought. For a man who thrived on innovation, there was something humbling about standing before a feat of engineering that had stood the test of time. The Roman Forum was their next destination. Shivan explained how it had once been the heart of Roman politics, religion, and daily life. The ruins stretched out before them like a puzzle, pieces of history scattered yet still commanding respect. The kids raced ahead, their laughter echoing among the stone columns. Elon followed behind, listening quietly as Shivan recounted stories of emperors and senators. He was fascinated, though in his own reserved way. He couldn't help but draw parallels between the ingenuity of ancient Rome and the challenges he faced in his own projects. It was as though the past and the future were in silent conversation and he was somewhere in between. Yet, for all its brilliance, modern Rome had its quirks, and Elon wasn't entirely sure how to feel about them. The narrow streets were chaotic, filled with buzzing Vespas and fearless pedestrians who seemed to have their own rules. Street vendors lined the sidewalks, selling everything from trinkets to selfie sticks. For someone used to the precision and order of his life, it was all a bit overwhelming. But Rome had its charms too. One such moment came when the kids spotted a gelato shop tucked away in a quiet corner. They begged their parents to stop, and soon the family was sitting outside, cones in hand. Shivan tried pistachio, the kids experimented with flavors they couldn't pronounce, and Elon, after some convincing, opted for stracciatella. As he took his first bite, the kids eagerly watched for his reaction. "It's not bad," he admitted, which for Elon was high praise. Shivan laughed, capturing the moment on her phone. It was a rare and simple joy, one that didn't involve calculations or algorithms. As the day stretched on, Shivan suggested a leisurely walk along the Tiber River. The setting sun bathed the city in golden light, and the waters of the river glimmered as if echoing the warmth of the scene. The kids ran ahead, pointing out boats and feeding pigeons, while Shivan and Elon strolled at a slower pace. For once, his phone was tucked away, and he seemed to be soaking in the moment. "What do you think of Rome so far?" Shivan asked, breaking the silence. Elon glanced around, his expression softer than it had been earlier in the day. "It's different," he said thoughtfully, "but it makes you think about things differently too." Shivan smiled, knowing that was the closest he'd get to saying he liked it. Rome was working its magic on him, bit by bit. By the time they returned to their hotel that evening, Elon was quieter than usual, not in a distracted way, but in a reflective one. Siobhan noticed it and gave him space, but their adventure was far from over. The next day, they were heading to the Vatican, a place steeped in tradition and spirituality. How would Elon, a man deeply rooted in science and progress, navigate a place defined by faith and centuries of ritual? And what happens when two worlds, one grounded in belief, the other in innovation, finally meet? The next day, the Musks ventured further into Rome, diving headfirst into its timeless streets and vibrant culture. For Siobhan and the kids, the city's magic was palpable. Siobhan had always been a lover of art and history, and Rome was like stepping into a living storybook. For the kids, every corner seemed to hold the promise of adventure, whether it was an unexpected fountain or a street musician playing a cheerful tune. Elon, however, was still adjusting. Their first stop that morning was the Pantheon, an ancient temple-turned-church known for its stunning dome and iconic oculus. The structure was enormous, its towering columns casting long shadows as they approached. Siobhan held the kids' hands and told them stories about how it had once been a temple to all Roman gods before becoming a Christian church. Elon trailed behind, his eyes fixed on the dome as if he were reverse engineering it in his mind. When they stepped inside, the air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the busy streets outside. Light poured through the oculus at the top of the dome, illuminating the space in a way that felt almost otherworldly. For someone who usually lived in a world of LED screens and artificial lighting, Elon found himself quietly admiring the simplicity and elegance of the design. Siobhan noticed his rare silence and nudged him gently. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. He nodded, his gaze still fixed on the interplay of light and shadow. As they left the Pantheon, the family wandered into a nearby piazza. The square was buzzing with life, cafes lining the edges, artists selling their work, and locals chatting animatedly. The kids begged to throw coins into the fountain at the center, claiming it would bring good luck. Elon raised an eyebrow but didn't argue, watching as they enthusiastically made their wishes. Siobhan chuckled, leaning into him and teasing, "You're not tempted to make a wish for reusable rockets or a Mars colony?" He smirked, finally loosening up enough to enjoy the moment. Lunch that day was a quintessential Roman affair. Outdoor seating at a small trattoria, plates piled high with fresh pasta, and the unmistakable aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air. Siobhan had chosen the place after reading about it in a guidebook, and it didn't disappoint. The kids devoured their meals while Siobhan and Elon sipped espresso, a rarity for him. "It's strong," he commented, almost to himself, earning a laugh from Siobhan. These small, seemingly insignificant moments began to stitch themselves together, creating memories Elon would later realize he hadn't fully appreciated until they were over. The afternoon brought another layer of Rome's charm. They strolled through Piazza Navona, one of the city's most famous squares. Street performers entertained crowds, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and music. Siobhan encouraged the kids to join a group of tourists watching a mime, while Elon stood back observing the scene with quiet interest. He had spent so much of his life focused on grand visions for the future that he rarely paused to enjoy the present. Here, in this chaotic yet beautiful city, he was beginning to see the value in it. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm, golden glow over the city, Siobhan suggested one last stop for the day, the Spanish Steps. The family climbed the famous staircase, pausing occasionally to catch their breath and take in the view. From the top, the city stretched out before them, its domes and rooftops bathed in the soft light of dusk. For the first time, Elon seemed to let go of his usual analytical demeanor. He leaned on the railing, taking in the scene with an expression that was almost wistful. Siobhan stood beside him, quietly content, knowing this was a moment neither of them would forget. The next morning brought a new kind of excitement, a visit to Vatican City. Even for Siobhan, who had planned much of the trip, the thought of stepping into the spiritual heart of Catholicism was awe-inspiring. The kids, of course, were more interested in whether they might spot the Pope. Elon, as usual, was harder to read. He wasn't someone who wore his thoughts on his sleeve, but there was a quiet curiosity in the way he studied the towering walls of the Vatican as they approached. Their tour began in St. Peter's Basilica, a place so grand it seemed to defy description. The ceiling soared impossibly high, adorned with intricate carvings in shimmering gold. Siobhan led the kids through the aisles, pointing out Michelangelo's Pieta and explaining its significance. Elon lingered behind, drawn to the vast dome overhead. The engineering of it fascinated him. He had seen photos before, of course, but standing beneath it was something else entirely. It was a masterpiece. As they moved through the basilica, their guide explained its history, weaving in tales of its construction and the role it had played in shaping the Catholic Church. Elon listened quietly, occasionally glancing at Siobhan, who seemed completely immersed. The kids asked questions, their voices echoing slightly in the vast space. Even in his silence, Elon was absorbing more than anyone realized. He wasn't a man of faith, but he respected the power of belief and the way it could move people to create something this extraordinary. The family eventually made their way to St. Peter's Square, where crowds were already gathering. Their guide explained that Pope Francis would be making an appearance to address the public. The kids buzzed with excitement, clutching Siobhan's hands as they waited. Elon stood to the side, watching the scene unfold with his usual detached curiosity. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the sheer energy of the crowd was undeniable. When Pope Francis finally appeared, the square erupted in cheers. He spoke from a balcony, his voice carried over speakers, addressing the crowd in Italian. Siobhan translated bits of it for the kids, who hung on every word. Even Elon found himself listening, drawn not so much by the content but by the tone. There was a warmth and sincerity to the Pope's words that cut through the language barrier. He spoke of compassion, responsibility, and the shared humanity that connected everyone in the square. For a brief moment, Elon felt something he couldn't quite define, a sense of belonging perhaps, or a recognition of something larger than himself. He wasn't sure if it was the setting, the Pope's words, or simply the weight of the moment. Whatever it was, it stayed with him as they left the square and returned to their hotel. Siobhan noticed his quiet demeanor but didn't press him. She knew better than anyone that Elon processed things in his own time. The day had left an impression on him, though he wasn't quite ready to admit it. Rome was no longer just a city of history and chaos. It was a place where even a man like Elon Musk, with his focus on the future, could pause and reflect on the past. As they prepared for the next day, there was an unspoken understanding that their time in the Vatican wasn't over. Something about this place, its history, its energy, its profound sense of purpose, had struck a chord. What would happen if Elon stepped beyond the public square and into the world of the Vatican itself? The day had come for Elon Musk to step into a world even further removed from his own, a private audience with Pope Francis. It was the kind of meeting few could imagine, let alone arrange, but Elon's fame, influence, and unrelenting curiosity had opened doors even to the Vatican. Siobhan had encouraged him to accept the invitation, though Elon remained somewhat skeptical. "What do I even say to the Pope?" he had joked earlier. But beneath his casual demeanor, there was a sense of intrigue he couldn't quite shake. Siobhan and the kids stayed back to explore the Vatican gardens, leaving Elon to make the journey alone. As he entered the Apostolic Palace, the grandeur of the surroundings was impossible to ignore. Ornate ceilings, gilded frames, and centuries-old tapestries lined the halls. It was a stark contrast to the minimalist, futuristic designs that defined Elon's world. Here, history wasn't just preserved, it was alive, speaking through every detail. When he was finally led into a private chamber, Pope Francis greeted him warmly. The Pope's presence was calm and inviting, his smile disarming even to someone as analytical as Elon. The room itself was understated, with simple furnishings that reflected the Pope's humility. They sat across from each other, the air buzzing with unspoken curiosity. Their conversation began gently with pleasantries about the beauty of the Vatican and Elon's impressions of Rome, but it didn't take long for the discussion to deepen. Pope Francis asked Elon about his work, what drove him, what he hoped to achieve. Elon, usually quick to rattle off facts and figures, paused before answering. "I want to ensure humanity has a future," he said simply. It was a statement both grand and deeply personal, and it seemed to resonate with the Pope. The Pope listened intently as Elon described his vision for Mars colonization and the role of artificial intelligence in shaping the future. But rather than marvel at the technology, Pope Francis shifted the focus to the ethical questions behind it. What kind of future are we building, he asked, and who are we building it for? It was a challenge, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that invited Elon to think beyond the mechanics of his work. For Elon, it was a rare moment of reflection. He was used to talking about progress, efficiency, and innovation. But here in this quiet room, the Pope was asking him to consider the moral implications of it all. They discussed the balance between technological advancement and human connection, the risks of AI, and the importance of ensuring that progress didn't come at the expense of compassion. The conversation wasn't one-sided. Elon, ever the problem solver, posed his own questions. He asked the Pope how faith could remain relevant in an age dominated by science and reason. Pope Francis, unshaken, spoke about the enduring power of spirituality, not as a rival to science, but as a complement to it. Faith and science are two paths toward the same truth, he said. Both seek to understand the world and our place within it. As the meeting came to a close, there was a sense of mutual respect between the two men. They didn't agree on everything, how could they? But they had found common ground in their shared desire to uplift humanity. As Elon left the chamber, his mind was racing with thoughts he hadn't expected to have. The Pope's words lingered, challenging him in ways no engineering problem ever could. Later that day, the family reunited, eager to hear about Elon's meeting. Shivan, always perceptive, noticed something different about him. He was quieter than usual, his responses measured and thoughtful. While the kids were busy recounting their own adventures, Shivan pulled him aside. "How was it?" she asked softly. Elon hesitated for a moment before replying. "It was thought-provoking." That evening, they attended a larger event at the Vatican, one that brought together leaders from various fields to discuss global challenges. The atmosphere was a mix of formality and excitement, with people mingling and exchanging ideas. Elon, usually the center of attention at such gatherings, found himself observing more than participating. The conversations around him felt different, less about ambition and more about responsibility. When Pope Francis addressed the crowd, his words echoed the themes he had discussed with Elon earlier. He spoke about the need for empathy in decision-making, the importance of putting people before profit, and the dangers of losing sight of our shared humanity. It was a message that resonated deeply, even among the most hardened skeptics in the room. As the evening wore on, Elon found himself drawn into a group discussion about technology and ethics. He listened as others shared their perspectives, occasionally offering his own thoughts. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't there to convince anyone of anything. He was there to learn, to challenge his own assumptions, and to engage in a dialogue that went beyond the usual metrics of success. By the time the event ended, Elon felt a strange mix of exhaustion and inspiration. The conversations he had that night weren't just about ideas, they were about values, about what it meant to be human in a world that often prioritized progress over purpose. It was a collision of faith and futurism, and it left him questioning more than he had ever anticipated. The next morning, as their time in Rome came to an end, the Musk family took one final walk through the city. The streets were quieter in the early morning light, the hustle and bustle of the day still a few hours away. Shivan held the kids' hands as they skipped ahead while Elon walked slightly behind, lost in thought. The trip had been nothing like what he had expected. He had come to Rome reluctantly, viewing it as a break from work rather than an opportunity to grow. But the city had a way of pulling him in, of making him see things differently. Its history, its contradictions, and its unshakable sense of identity had left a mark on him. And the Vatican, with its profound questions about faith and morality, had pushed him to reflect in ways he rarely allowed himself to. As they reached the edge of the Tiber River, the family paused to take in the view. Shivan leaned into Elon, sensing the change in him. "Rome suits you," she said with a smile. He didn't reply immediately, but when he did, his words were simple and honest. "It makes you think." That night, as the family packed their bags, Elon sat alone for a moment, scrolling through his phone. He opened Twitter, typed a short message, and hit send. It read, "Visited the Vatican. Talked with Pope Francis. Rome reminds us of what we can build, but also of what we must not lose." The post quickly went viral, sparking debates and discussions around the world. People dissected his words, searching for hidden meanings and implications. But for Elon, it wasn't about making a statement. It was about sharing a glimpse of the journey he had been on, a journey that had taken him out of his comfort zone and left him changed. As the plane took off the next morning, the Musks looked out the window for one last glimpse of the city. Rome faded into the distance, but its impact lingered. For Elon, it wasn't just a vacation. It was a reminder that progress and purpose didn't have to be at odds, and that sometimes the most important journeys weren't about where you went, but what you discovered along the way. Whether it's engineering rockets or exploring ancient streets, humanity's greatest achievements come from balancing progress with purpose. Elon's journey through history, faith, and family shows that even the most forward-thinking minds need moments of reflection. What do you think? Can science and spirituality truly coexist? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. See you next time.